I have the great pleasure now of introducing Bolu Omidiji, Manager of Community Impact and ESG Policy with the Canadian Credit Union Association. Bolu, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good day, everyone. I'm joining you here from Edmonton, Alberta, so it's nice to see the room. This is the Creating Shared Value Through Climate Action, Equipping Credit Unions with a Starter Pack panel session. And with me here today are Ben Janzen, Senior Manager, ESG and Sustainability Reporting at Meridian Credit Union in Ontario, Canada. Dennis Cunningham, Manager of Environmental Sustainability at Assiniboine Credit Union, Manitoba, Canada as well. Liz Arkinstall, Manager Purpose Integration, Libro Credit Union in Ontario, Canada, and Garrett Jones, Vice President Corporate Sustainability at Delphi from BC, Canada, British Columbia. I'll be doing a refresher because I joined some of the sessions yesterday, and I know that there's been so much talk about climate action, climate risk, climate resilience, climate proof. So I'll be doing like a refresher for about 5 minutes just to take us through why we think climate risk, climate action is important for credit unions. You can please share the slides.
Bolu, do you see the slides on your side? We've got them up on the screen here.
Oh, no. No, I don't. Awesome. I see them now. Thank
Perfect.
you. Next slide, please. So as I've said, I know that some of the sessions yesterday went through why climate risk is important, but this quote by the Secretary General of the United Nations brings it home for me. Climate change is not the source of all ills, but it has a multiplier effect. And it has a multiplier effect on everything that we hold there, whether it's our social lives, whether it's global trade, whether it's on health as well. Next slide. And so for me, I decided to put this because when you talk about climate risk, these are some of the risks that comes to mind, physical risk and transition risk. But then one of the things that I want to emphasize is that climate risk is not only climate risk, it is now financial risk as well. When you look at the effect on everything that we hold there, whether it's businesses, whether it's your homes, whether it's on insurance, to bring it home, in Canada, we year-to-date damage losses or insured losses is about 7.7 billion. And in the United States, it's about 19 billion when you consider the hurricanes, the floods, and everything currently going on. Next slide. And so our government's responding, our regulators responding to this, there's regulatory pressure around the world, whether it's in the US, the UK, the EU. You would have seen that there are a lot of climate guidance that is being, or disclosures that is being launched or released now. And deadlines are currently looming. When you look at this map, there's a lot of 2024, there's 2025, there's 2026, all around the world. And so it's important that credit unions start to act on this. Next slide. When you think about ESG or when you think about climate, I call it the alphabet soup of disclosures because there's so much going on there. You hear about IFRS, you hear about TCFD, you hear about the B Corp certification. So this panel session will actually break it down just so it's easy, and it's a starter pack for you to start to act on climate in your own jurisdictions. Next slide. Awesome. So that's the end of my slide. You can now stop sharing the slide and then we'll go to the panelists now. So my first question to the panel. This panel will run for, I think, 45 minutes, and we'll do 25 questions for the panel discussion and open it up at the end for about 10 minutes. So my first question is to Ben from Meridian. What does the climate or environmental sustainability file look like in your credit union? And how is your credit union approaching climate action?
Thanks, Bolu, and thank you to UN Sustainability Network for hosting this and inviting us to be part of this. I want to say, and I attended the day yesterday too. So many of us are working at the beginning stages of this, and really, trying to wrap our heads around that. And this is where Meridian is too. It's difficult to know how to tackle something when there are so many unknowns, and it looks like, as Bolu, pointed out right at the beginning, climate can affect all these things and exacerbate all kinds of different parts of our communities. And so how do we then kind of make sense of that? How will we know that there are climate impacts in our portfolio if we don't start to think about, well, what would a climate impact in our portfolio look like? But stepping back then further, well, what would those things even be? And so, we've been, on early stages of our journey in terms of kind of just setting out big, riverbanks, in terms of, the important thing is about having, at this stage of the game, is about having conversations within our credit union, asking these questions, making sure there's a framework from board and management level to say, yes, we are going to, include conversations about the environment and about climate risks into our meetings, into our policy. Once there's clear ways to do that. We have a broad ESG board governance framework, and that then starts to put us on the journey to as it kind of trickles down to my work, which is then sorting out what does messaging look like. We've had in Canada some recent legislation that's come into force that says you shouldn't be greenwashing, but the guidelines haven't been established about what that means. And so making sure that I am like looking at these standards, reading the standards, trying to unpack what they mean, and then having conversations internally with different departments, and meeting them where they're at. I talk about data with the people that really like data. I talk about lending with the people that care about lending. I talk about how to risk frameworks with the folks that talk about risk, and then gradually move us from this cloud to where there are kind of tangible steps we can make.
Awesome, thank you, Ben. Over to you, Dennis. What does climate or environmental sustainability look like in Assiniboine Credit Union, and how are you approaching climate action?
Thanks, Bolu. Yeah, great question. For us, we've evolved sort of our commitment over the last 16 years related to environmental sustainability. We started off as a kind of a siloed corporate social responsibility team, and moved to something that's more integrated across departments. And we have commitments that are clearly linked to a values-based banking policy that we established a number of years ago, and we use that as part of the the baked-in approach to sustainability. We have environmental goals that are included in employee performance reviews, and those goals, meeting and exceeding them, impact bonus calculations as well as other aspects of our overall performance. So that's kind of the starting point for us, trying to solidify this within kind of operational considerations. And that's then led to annual climate targets that we've set, primarily for our corporate emissions. That's where we, sort of began the process, just looking at those areas of our operations where we determined we had significant environmental impacts and likely had associated greenhouse gas emissions coming from them. And so that was, again, sort of an evolution of, how do you measure these things? How do you capture that data? Who do you need to engage with to collect that data? How do you make sure you're tracking it accurately, reporting on it transparently, building those systems, accessing different resources that that allow you to do that in sort of a consistent way year over year. We've drawn on lots of local expertise to learn, kind of about both the energy consumption in our branches. We've used that to inform decisions on how we design and build branches. We've tracked employee commuting habits year over year and used that information to then design programs to help employees become more green and active commuters, as opposed to relying on drive-alone commuting. So we've done a number of things that they've always been informed by data, but also sort of then been supported by as much effective communication and engagement as possible. Climate change is a long-term issue that requires both kind of immediate action, but some vision. So we've tried to combine the two in a nice, effective way.
Thank you, Dennis. I have some similarities yet differences as well. So I'm going to go to Liz. Liz, how does this file look like in Libro Credit Union, and how are you approaching climate action?
Yeah, just to build on Ben and Dennis, it really started with a question connected to our purpose. So we are a purpose-driven organization, and those early conversations began with those questions. How are we strengthening? So our purpose statement is to strengthen financial well-being for a better tomorrow. And so what we asked ourselves is, how do we strengthen our owners' financial well-being by helping them transition to a low-carbon economy? And so we actually we've had these conversations for a few years and really did prioritize doing some research and getting a data-driven approach to what we were going to do. So we asked ourselves the question. We knew it was an imperative to support our owners, and so we kind of set forth on that work. And so last year, we went through a double materiality assessment where, not a shock, but climate and financed emissions and biodiversity type topics were identified as key material topics. And so, it was also consistently identified by our board and ELT as a priority. So it is now baked into our new strategy that we are committed to reducing our impact and also that of our owners within our financed emissions as well. And so we had a look at right now. So strategy around climate sits within the purpose integration manager role, which is my role. We did then kind of do the work to identify, what resources we didn't have the bench strength to have all the knowledge that we needed. And so we identified someone on staff that is focused solely on climate. And we're working with our risk, our finance, our ESG, our business teams, our data teams, and we've created an internal climate working group to get some of that work done. So we've identified data improvement as a key priority, following then by how are we embedding this into our strategy and defining those targets and metrics. So right now we just have internal operational emissions targets that we've identified, and we're kind of just playing around with the financed emissions targets as well.
Awesome. I have some similarities, and the key similarities for me include data, how all the credit unions are actually using climate data in their own, to develop probably in their own strategies or operations. And then Meridian is approaching from an ESG perspective, Assiniboine from a values-based banking perspective, and Libro from purpose. So awesome. That's good on all fronts. Now coming to Garrett, who is from the consulting sector. My question for you, I haven't heard how all the credit unions are actually approaching this file. What should credit unions look out for when they want to include climate in their overall strategy and operations?
Yeah, thanks, Bolu. Great to be here today, and thank you so much, UIS and UNF, United Nations Federal Credit Union, for hosting this amazing event here. Wish I would be able to join you live, but I'm joining you from Kelowna, BC. One of the top things that that we tell our clients as they're beginning their journey, wherever they are on the journey, is that it is a journey and it's not a sprint. One of the top pitfalls that I do see is the lack of commitment or at the top, so at the leadership, from the executive leadership and from the board, and a lack of clear governance as far as who owns climate. Now, it should really permeate throughout the organization. I think Liz in particular, well, both Ben, Dennis, and Liz really all identified that it shouldn't sit in silo and it should really permeate throughout the organization. To Liz's point, finance, risk in particular need to be a part of that. Now, peeling it back, you're beginning your journey. One of the things that we certainly recommend is look to global leading frameworks. Bolu did a great job looking at the alphabet soup, if you will, of disclosure. One of the baseline or foundational disclosures is the TCFD, or the Task Force on Financial Climate Related Disclosures. This is now rolled in under the IFRS and the ISSB, so the International Sustainability Standards Board. Again, more acronyms. Always look to that framework. It is really that foundational framework, and it guides you through integrating, and asking questions about how you can integrate climate risk and opportunity thinking into your governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. And then one of the things that we're really looking with our clients here as they're beginning their journey, you have the best in class here, global frameworks that you're looking to align with. Look at best in class financial institutions and credit unions and how they are integrating climate into their disclosures and how they are disclosing and reporting on that. And then that can kind of help you see, okay, here's kind of that, maybe that future state of where I'd like to go. And you start to kind of set that gap from your current state. Here's where we're at, right, when it looks to, to how we're thinking about climate. So, just to recap, really, starts at the top. You need to have that executive buy-in. Look to global standards and frameworks, to support you, within your journey. There's a ton of resources out there, right? And then look at some of the peers and best-in-class peers, and then finally that kind of current state, where your current state is right now, and then you can kind of start to chart your path for integrating it across your operations and your strategies.
Thanks, you, Garrett. Thank you. Awesome summary out there. But one thing that struck me is like climate starts at the top. And in terms of you need executive or your board buy-in. So going to Liz now, how has governance played a key role in your climate action and climate risk management? I know that every other person touched on governance being a clear factor in climate action at their own credit unions, but how has governance played a key role in Libro Credit Union in terms of your climate action and climate risk management?
Yeah, and just to start off by saying we still have work to do, but I think, like you said, the key important piece is that this was a directive and identified as a key priority within your board. And so we know it's that is the building block for effective climate risk management as well as opportunity management. And when you think of the board's key accountabilities, approval of strategy, risk management, talent, having the right talent, we know that this is really where it needs to start. I think what we've seen is that that governance piece is driving data-driven action and accountability. So that's been a critical step for us. So we started out by completing a gap assessment against the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures governance recommendation section. So really at that time, we weren't sure, hey, did we have some of the building blocks here or not? And so we looked at what our strengths and weaknesses were. We set out a short, mid, and long-term plan to fill those gaps, and we had support of our board and executive leadership team to do that. So we then set out to do some of the work. Examples, assigning roles and responsibilities for overseeing that climate strategy, the risk management to different management level, but as well as board level committees. And that's where I'm saying, we still have some work to do there to kind of finalize those things. We definitely upped our education, identified the skills and the resources needed. So even board, they did an ESG and climate fluency assessment, kind of graded themselves amongst many of the other competencies that they need. And we provided, and are still ongoing, providing learning opportunities to them. So while we're still working on kind of what that governance framework looks like, and we have a draft, as a first step, and it was actually on the request of board this year, we're working on adding an environmental risk category in our quarterly risk dashboard. So even though, we have that framework coming, they wanted to see things now to start to hold us accountable, which is great. So those will be followed by things like a risk appetite statement and then our management guidelines. And so it really is what what's the saying? What gets measured matters, and vice versa. And so that's really, I think, kind of setting us up well there. We also, in our new strategy, added a note in our guiding principles that ESG is embedded in our decision making, and that includes climate data. And so we still have work to do to really, how do we unpack that for people? How do we build that really into our management level guiding principles? But that's certainly a first start. So I think there's different ways that you can embed it within your governance. We all have different committees within our board and our management, around risk and credit, audit and finance. For us, we have a people and culture group. And so in our draft, we've taken an approach of distributing that across a number of places. So it doesn't just sit in one place. Certainly board holds that ultimate accountability, but both it's distributed across our board committees as well as our management level committees.
That's awesome. I think in terms of this, it's the accountability and building trust as well that matters. And so, Dennis, commit to trust or building trust. What strategies have been effective in building trust and encouraging active participation in climate-related programs?
Well, I'll go back to, I think both Ben and Liz have sort of said this, that that leadership at top has been really, really critical for us for establishing that trust in what we're trying to achieve. We do employee polling surveys every year, employee attitude surveys, and one of the questions that's asked is about the value that's placed on environmental decisions within the organization, and whether or not we're making the right decisions and heading in the right direction. And we have very clear and strong support for our environmental programs. So the trust, it takes time to establish. You have to have, clear rationale as to why you're taking these actions when we have so many things to do as credit unions in the, in the service of our members. Why are we adding, kind of these types of activities that seem to go above and beyond kind of day-to-day business? But if you can clearly communicate the value and the importance of climate action and the impact, the positive impact that it can have on community and on members, it does become relevant. The more we talk to our members and employees about kind of values and purpose for us as an organization, the more kind of climate action resonates. So I, really for me and much of my background is related to communications. That's where the strength in being able to sort of have good solid messages about about why you undertake these actions plays importance. And then, being able to show relevance. So, ages ago, we undertook some exercises to reduce reduce member statements mailing. And, there was an environmental argument for doing it, but even more important was the economic processes behind, or decisions behind it. So being able to balance out, sort of what are the economic benefits, what are the environmental benefits, what else is delivered to members and employees. They all can help kind of create that that engagement and support.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dennis. Ben, what strategies have been effective in building trust and encouraging active participation in climate-related programs in Meridian?
Kind of picking up what Dennis was saying. I mean, the engagement and kind of celebrating when you see folks working on kind of climate-related things. We have structurally we have an ESG working group that governs some of that. Primarily, it helps to feed into reporting, and then we also have an ESG ambassadors group, which is so the ESG working group is really kind of that layer below executive leadership, and the ambassadors is meant to be that grassroots. And so kind of having both of those groups engaged allows for ideas, particularly idea generation kind of comes out of the grassroots, which you might expect, and then looking to how do we then follow that excitement. How do we look for ways and honor the things that people are doing? Because I think we're beyond the times of employees and organizations being like, why would we work on climate related things? At least at Meridian, it's how do we? And then us as a small team, our ESG team is really 5 people. We have 2 on social impact and 2 on named ESG, and then a VP that we report into. And so there's limited ways that we can do it. We really are reliant, particularly in an organization that's 2,200 staff. How do we find and support the good stuff that's already happening? And particularly a great example of that was just following a community gardens idea. And then helping a number of branches pilot that for 3 branches it may have kind of I think we were as I reflect on the panel that was before this, talking about how small actions can kind of are the way to start, and that has been a way for us to talk about and demonstrate that there is passion and interest at a grassroots level, and you can share that through the organization, and then others then get interested and say, oh, I can do that kind of thing too. That feels tangible to me. That that's maybe not even into our core business, but it's something that is a benefit to the community and is an environmental benefit to the community, and a way for us to start different conversations with our members. So finding those places where it's happening, celebrating them, and then trying to build momentum, and then leveraging multiple kind of different groups throughout the organization to see what kind of can be. Then when you get to them and say, okay, now we really need to do X about building new ways to collect data, then there's that trust of we were talking about this kind of thing that felt warm and that felt tangible and doable, and now this is much more complicated, but I'm going to be a good partner here.
Awesome. So it's celebrating your wins, communicating, balancing the wins with economic benefits as well. That's what I hear across Assiniboine and Meridian. So Garrett, coming to the maybe more technical question, how should credit unions assess their exposure to climate-related risks, such as physical risk, or as we call it, extreme weather events and transition risk, in terms of policy or regulatory changes?
Yeah, how much time do we have? Yeah, this is obviously a big topic. Really quick, I'd actually, quick plug here for Bolu and the CCUA. We're supporting them with the development of a climate risk playbook. That is tailored to credit unions. So sorry, Bolu, if I stole any of your thunder there. Looking to roll that out beginning next year, and it is really designed to be a guide for credit unions that are, at various steps of their journey as it relates to understanding and managing their climate risk and their climate exposure. One of the first things that I always say is build the internal capacity. As much as it would be nice to think that we could go out and have a pretty platform and dashboard and tool that is going to tell us everything we need to know, the reality is on the risk functions, or pardon me, on the finance and risk functions of your team, there should be a certain level of capacity. And we've heard this, from basically all the panelists here, is about building that internal capacity and understanding is really, number one. From there, look to your jurisdiction, regulatory regimes. If there is no support that you're getting that is being provided through those, look to, again, leading standards and frameworks. So in particular, United Nations Environmental Program Financial Initiative, so the UNFFI, they have fantastic resources as it relates to evaluating and understanding climate risk. Another key one that we look to for scenario analysis specifically is the NGFS. So that is the Network for Greening the Financial System, and they are really designing the scenarios or the stress tests for evaluating climate risk on your lending and investing portfolio. Coming back here really quick, you've built some internal capacity. You have a good understanding of some of the frameworks and what you can operate within. Liz kind of touched on this. It was more of a double materiality assessment that they undertook that was more general as far as it relates to ESG. Going down a little bit specific for climate will be a fundamental first step. Do a materiality assessment to understand what are the most impactful physical risks and transition risks to your credit union relative to your geographical area and the regulatory regimes in which you operate in. So I highly recommend that. You can start to get an idea of what those risks are. And it doesn't need to be an extremely complex process. That could just be, your risk, your finance team, and, maybe some external experts or internal expertise that can really start to put some of those risks on the drawing board. And then from there, you're going to really start to map out your vulnerabilities relative to your physical assets that you're lending to, and or businesses that you are lending. And then finally, you're going to get into scenario analysis and stress testing your lending portfolio, and looking at different scenarios as far as the environments change, the physical environments change under certain degrees of change. And what I mean by degrees is as the temperature continues to warm here due to climate change and global warming, what impacts is that going to have on the assets that you lend to? So again, just really paring it back, build internal capacity. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet and this beautiful platform that can do everything for you. They're really fundamentally, it's developing that in-house expertise that we always recommend. So I'm going to pause there and hand it back to Bolu.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm also going to pause here and see if there are questions, because we have about 10 minutes to go. Although I have lots of questions for the panelists, I want to take questions from everyone here. Going to Patrick, I want to know if there are questions from the audience for now. If not, we can continue.
No one has thrown me a hi sign in the room that they have a question. Let me give them a moment. Sometimes you have to ask. I think people are listening very carefully. I don't see anything in the chat either. So, Bolu, whatever questions you've got, you can continue this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Ben, I know that we've said a lot about accountability, about building trust, about governance, but the SDG 17 is about partnerships. And it cuts across all the other 16 goals that we have. And so in terms of climate, how has Meridian collaborated with other organizations to address climate challenges within your communities?
Thanks, Bolu, for that question. I mean, I think, we're really happy to have, the Canadian Credit Union Association have an environmental, action committee, and Liz is the co-chair of that, and so leveraging our peers is huge. Understanding what they're doing, what tools they're using, what policies they might be implementing is just so critical in our learning because as Garrett mentioned, how do you build capacity internally without kind of learning from others, and so that's been huge. And then there are broader technical networks. We became a Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials member earlier this year, and so attending, they have user group meetings, and that has been a huge benefit to understanding how different financial institutions are calculating, in particular the financed emissions. That's what PCAF is oriented towards. So that's huge. And then also we have a membership in the Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, and that is a across industries a membership that not-for-profit is also part of the same family that Delphi is part of, and Delphi has been a great consultant partner for us as well, and as we continue on this journey, and then attending this, hearing and learning. I think there's constant learning that is happening, and I'm so grateful that particularly for the credit union sector that is really giving and generous when it comes to any questions that we might have or best practices. I'll stop there.
We did have a
Thank
question.
you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben.
Okay.
We did have a question come up in the room. I will let Sophia turn on her mic and ask.
For all this wonderful information. So I was wondering, I know that in Canada, there's been more regulation regarding TCFD. I believe that's becoming more like a requisite. And it was mentioned as well by several panelists, the concept of double materiality, which in a nutshell, as you may know, it's what the CSRD requires in Europe. So I'm wondering, what's the perspective of credit unions in Canada about the similarities of requirements eventually being close to this CSRD directive in Europe? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to answer that? I think, Garrett, there was a webinar from Delphi about the similarities with the Canadian disclosures. So do you want to answer that?
I could jump in really quick. Great question.
Garrett,
Thank you.
Garrett, before you go, just because we have a group of people who are nearer the beginner side of the spectrum, I'm just going to speak briefly to CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. This is a new regulation out of Europe that governs the reporting of sustainable related information from companies. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that it divides
Yeah.
sustainability and other concepts, but sustainability and climate.
I think you're off mic, but sustainability and climate are related in this directive. But so the question is, this European directive that basically requires some sort of double materiality reporting, even that phrase might be a little intimidating to some of the folks in this room. But what are Canadian and people from any country outside of Europe thinking about that as the context for any reporting that they're doing?
So from what we're seeing in our experience, I'll speak specifically to Canada, that is the direction of travel. Here in Canada, we are still a little bit behind when you compare it to the EU Commission and the work that they are doing. What I will say is our financial regulator a couple years ago came out and did mandate climate-related risk management and disclosure, and has really started to set the tone here in Canada. That is really focused on the concept of single materiality or traditional financial materiality, and really understanding how climate-related risks impact traditional financial materiality. Then in the credit union system, they are typically provincially regulated. So, across the different provinces, there are different regulators that are starting to set up similar reporting regimes that is focused on climate. The last thing that I will leave you with is a couple years ago, Canada, we set up the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, which is really looking to align to the global framework that is the IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards. So, what this all leads to is sustainability and climate reporting will go along financial reporting. That's I think the key takeaway here, and really understanding those material topics of environmental and social and governance issues and how they impact your financial institution or your credit union from a financial perspective is absolute paramount. Last thing I'll say on double materiality assessments, it is still a relatively nascent area, as Patrick, as you even kind of identified, and it is continuing to emerge. Here in Canada, we are taking steps, but at this stage, it is voluntary.
Thank you, Garrett. I think that I can maybe chime in and do a plug for the materiality benchmarking report that we published earlier this year in collaboration with Delphi as well, where we recommended double materiality for credit unions to do. But because we are almost at time, or we are at time, I just want to talk about collaboration a little bit and go to Dennis, about how credit unions, how you have collaborated with other organizations to address climate challenges in your communities.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we look for partnerships all the time to both support our efforts to be more sustainable, but also to support sort of community efforts to be more sustainable. So example would be an organization that's a social enterprise here in Winnipeg called Compost Winnipeg. We don't have compost collection across residences and businesses to any great extent here in the city. Compost Winnipeg wanted to introduce a business program. We were a pilot participant in their program. We provided them with seed funding to help them with business planning, and we've been a long-term client of theirs once they got their business up and running. So, that kind of thing where we see gaps and we recognize that other social enterprises or other nonprofits are trying to address those gaps, we like to collaborate and partner with them. We just funded the installation of a couple of EV chargers at 2 co-op housing locations that are both members of ours. And the EV chargers are supporting electric vehicles that another partner or a member of ours, a car share cooperative, has put in place. So we're looking for what we kind of call shared value, where we can help members meet environmental or social targets, gain experience and understanding about how these things work, and then also help another member who is operating a fairly greenhouse gas intensive business, a car share cooperative, start to decarbonize their business. So those are a couple of examples. We have lots of them where where we're working with nonprofits just to help them deliver on their mission to change behavior. But there's real value in that kind of collaboration, and definitely it helps us amplify our commitment to sustainability, but also then helps build kind of community capacity and a broader understanding of the issues and the opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. We are at time, although I still have lots of questions. I don't think that we can take them anymore. but wanted to do a plug-in for the Climate Action Working Group, the CCUA Climate Action Working Group that all the credit unions that are speaking here today are members of. I think that even from the coordinating perspective, I've learned a lot. Liz is our co-chair, and I think that it helps that we have collaboration across credit unions in Canada, and so they can then collaborate on so many issues. We also have the materiality benchmarking report that Ben dropped in the chat as well. Ben and Delphi worked on that. So it's interesting to see that there's a lot of collaboration going on here. And I didn't think about that before. We are also working with Delphi on the regional climate scenario analysis. And I think that two of the credit unions here are actually participating as well. So there's a lot. Just talking about collaborations, there's a lot of collaboration and partnerships going on here in the Canadian credit union sector. And so before I end, I will say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much for speaking. I know it's a very broad topic, but then I hope that we've been able to share some wealth of knowledge in terms of how credit unions here are identifying and operationalizing climate risk strategy. Delphi has done an amazing work trying to break that down, but we need like a whole day to do that topic. But just saying thank you so much to everyone here, and thank you to everyone in the room as well. And have a great day. Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause for this panel. Collaboration and cooperation are the name of the game. That's the takeaway. And also, don't be afraid of that alphabet soup. The soup is warm, but it's very comfortable. Dip your toe in. Start with UNEP FI. Start measuring, because what you measure matters. Okay. My huge thanks to everybody on that panel, everybody in this room for a great morning of activities. We will be sharing all the information from our morning sessions and everything else across the summit on uisnetwork.org. That's just a reminder.